And here we are in the spoilers chat video for Richard Hall's latest offering, Madeleine, Why the Cover-Up? And I just wanted to take a chance to talk to some of you guys. I know off the video that I put out, the Searchlight update, I think some of you might not really understand where I truly stand on this case. So I just want to clear some of that up. I think it was pretty clear in the original Brain Scratch, but I don't know if you guys are going back and watching that. So I might retread some information a little bit here, but I really wanted to go over any new conclusions or new thoughts that I had after watching Richard's work on this piece as it pertains to the case. And here's my thoughts on that. So first off, I really was just a tad bit disappointed that from the start of this series, Richard is already set with some very strong preconceived notions. And I totally understand it. I know when you're invested in a case and you've done multiple parts on a series, I've done this before, obviously. I know that's very hard to move yourself off of those biases and to try to take a fresh run at some potential new theories. Like I mentioned in the review video, in the first part of this series, he tries to explain why he has those beliefs. I don't know that I have seen enough about that to really understand it. One of his main beliefs is that she died much earlier in that week, that she was reported missing on May 3rd, but he thinks her last confirmed sighting was April 29th, so he's pegging that as the last day that she was alive. It's just a little too simplistic for me in terms of a conclusion. Just because you had your official last sighting on that day, that doesn't necessarily mean that that is the day that her life ended, or that her life ended at all, which is another part of his kind of summary conclusion that I'm not comfortable with using that as a starting point, because it kind of paints everything that follows it. For example, one of the biggest things that hit me in the head when I was watching this series is he did such a good job of looking into Robert Murat. And essentially, there was several times where he was saying things and I was getting triggers from other cases totally unrelated to this, where I'm like, yep, I've seen that characteristic before. Yep, I've seen that characteristic before. This guy has the makeup of someone that is certainly potentially able to do this to a little girl, to abduct her, to possibly harm her or do something with her along those lines. But because Richard was so set on his conclusions at the start of this series, he doesn't really go down that avenue. He kind of just uses that information, and then, I don't know, he doesn't really explain even how it makes sense to bring that information up, but then your ultimate conclusion is that Robert was doing this to throw the police off, that he essentially offered himself up as a red herring to throw off the police. It's a very strange conclusion to hit after you've done such a really, really good analysis on why this guy could have done it, including the analysis about how this guy talked to police and got a bunch of information wrong about what he had done over those days. And when he amended his statements, his weakest statements were made on May 3rd. That seemed to be the day that he most often said, I think I did this, but I can't really remember. I think we went there, but I can't really remember. It really just kind of hit me when I was watching it. I'm like, why are we not looking into this guy more? How was this guy ruled out? He lives close to the area. He knows the area. He's known in the area. If you want to talk about any type of superarching conspiracy theory of someone that could be protected by someone in that area, it would much easier fit Robert than people that had traveled to that area to vacation, who then have all of their super conspiracy come from the UK and reach over and put this cloud over Portugal. I don't know. And that super theory is really one of the things that I struggle with most. Now, look, I obviously believe in conspiracy theories. I have personally seen conspiracies go to work. Anyone that doesn't believe in conspiracy theories, do yourself a favor and just watch any season of the television show Survivor. You will see when people are working together and someone stands to make a lot of money in that case, a lot of strange things happen interpersonally, and if you have a group of three, usually there's going to wind up being a conspiracy with two of those people against the third. It is human nature. It does occur. I certainly believe in it. Part of the issue I have, particularly with this latest film series, is the super theory that this is all tied to some level of elite pedophilia. And let me tell you why I have issues with it. First of all, the McCanns. Are we really talking about an elite class of person here? Admittedly, okay, they're both, they both work in the medical field. They both have extremely strong careers. Obviously, they did have enough connections to ring some serious bells to get this type of response that they got from the UK when their daughter went missing. But is that the same as having enough political and power? It simply comes down to power. It's not always about money. But even, I'll throw that in, or money. Did they really have enough of any of those three conditions for political leaders in the UK to put into place a conspiracy theory involving dozens of people and keep all of that ratcheted tight for a decade at this point, where not one person in these dozens of people that would have had to conspire against the police in Portugal, who were obviously looking for the truth, people that are conspiring against the media, some of which who are looking for the truth, but a world that is really looking for the truth. Not one of these dozens and dozens of people is going to fold on this conspiracy or have a partner that's not part of the conspiracy that notices something weird is going on and decides to speak up about it. It is too vast. It's too vast. And he's got this great graphic that he brings up where he's trying to outline this conspiracy theory. You got MI5 over here, and they're misleading the Portuguese authorities. You got MI6 over here, they're misleading the media. It's just too huge. For what? Boil this all down. For what? Even if we assume the worst about the McCanns and what they had done with Madeleine, so that this overarching government-based conspiracy group can protect some stupid doctors that abused their child or did something horrible to her? Why? It makes no sense. Do the McCanns have videotape of government officials at some party somewhere? I mean, that's kind of where the thought process goes. That's really why part 5 of this series didn't work for me the strongest, because all of a sudden you're starting to try to make these loose connections. Oh, look, the McCanns went and had lunch with the grandson of Sigmund Freud, who later got busted for pedophilia. Ba-ba-bam. There we go. We got a connection, right? Not really. It is far too circumstantial. It is far too circumstantial. I'm sorry. Because you have lunch with someone doesn't mean that this was a guy that was coming over to your pedophilia parties. You happen to have pictures on him, and that's why he's got to be nice to you. And oh, by the way, when you're trying to commit a crime, you can always call up these people and threaten them. Really? You have enough clout as this little Jerry McCann down here to be able to do that to government authorities? It just, the weight there of the power that would be required to do that doesn't make sense. Now, if we were talking about Prince Charles that had gone on vacation and one of his children went missing and there was some strange cover-up conspiracy, absolutely at that point, sure. Because then you get people involved where it's like, hey, this can't be found out because this will ruin our entire country. And there would be enough of a power tilt in that scenario where you can certainly justify it. For the McCanns, what do these people hold? What do they hold over the government of the UK, over several leaders of that government to affect a conspiracy theory of that size and keep it in place for all these years? Doesn't really make sense to me. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that I don't think the parents did something here. What I think is a much more reasonable thought is, if the parents are responsible for what happened to her, they got away with it. They got away with one simple act, which was hiding her. That's all it would take. Think of the truth in, if they successfully hid her somewhere where no one has been able to find her, think of how reasonable that truth is, versus super mega conspiracy involving elite government pedophiles, dozens of employees that are somehow being controlled either monetarily or through their position, and none of that is cracking under 10 years. Even though, by Richard's own information, he sees that some people that were supporting the McCanns have kind of reversed on that a little bit, or you get this information from this other doctor that went on vacation with them where they made some lewd hand gestures and all this. It doesn't make sense. Either the information would crack out of that or it wouldn't. But the very simple thought of, did they just get away with hiding a body, makes all of this seem way too heavy to be based in reality for me personally. Because that's all it would take, is that they hit her, or that she's somewhere else and we still don't know where she is. And that's kind of where I'm at with this thing. Super government conspiracy, I could still say it's possible, but I would put it at like 10%, all right? Parents were involved in this. I think that is probably the strongest case, particularly if you look at the evidence, if you look at the cadaver dogs that were brought out, if you look at the history of the cadaver dogs and how reliable they have been, if you look at the hits they had, if you talk about the rental car, if you talk about the neighbors that saw the trunk of the rental car opened and the story they heard about animals' blood being spilled in there and having to be dried out for days, there is a lot of compelling information to support the theory that the family was involved in this some way. Does it really come down to a picture of Madeleine with makeup on? No, sorry. And that was one part of this documentary where I was really scratching my head because of the biases that he had set up, believing that the McCanns absolutely had to be involved, believing that Madeleine probably died before this. He then was predisposed to trying to pay that picture off to the point where, and I know he's an analytical guy. I know if he would look at that picture with a clear mind, he would think twice about this, but I don't think he did that in this film. His conclusions are, an adult put that makeup on. Look at that makeup. That eyeshadow, first of all, is not even complete. It's literally on like her eyeball and goes up about halfway. It doesn't even go up as high as someone that would know how to put on eyeshadow. Yes, I used to do community theater. I know how to put on my eyeshadow. Outside of that, on this side of her face, if you're looking at the picture, sorry, I think it's on this side. My camera reverses when I'm talking to you guys. You can see that there's a bunch of blue eyeshadow that's literally been smudged running down her face. Tell me that that is not a kid that got into her mom's makeup and decided to try to put some eyeshadow on. It really doesn't make sense. But then he even goes beyond that and tries to tie this picture into, well, it had to be taken just before she died because look at the length of her hair. Kids' bangs grow, and they might get their bangs cut more than once a year. That is not conclusive. Is it possible? Certainly. Is it enough to make a conclusion that this was some kind of photo that was taken to remember her by, where her parents would have dressed her up as a Lolita, as it's said? No, it's just not enough for me. I'm sorry, it's not enough of a conclusion. But I still think that there is a 30% chance, have I used up all my percentage yet? That this is someone unrelated, possibly someone like Robert Murat, possibly someone else that lived in the area, a crime of opportunity when they noticed a pattern that the parents were partaking in. And that pattern being the parents going out to this bar every night and leaving their kids in the room. Now, something that Richard actually kind of set up, but then didn't really bring together for me in his film, was when he was talking about the parents possibly medicating their children. I think that there is certainly some more thought that needs to go into that. I think that there could be a scenario where that might have happened. If I heard him right, Madeleine's mother was an anesthesiologist, I believe is what we call it here in the States, which is someone that typically is helping other people be drugged to go to sleep before they go into surgery or something like that. Is it possible that someone in that line of work would rely on some type of chemical to put their kids to sleep so that they could go out to this party and know that their kids aren't going to get up and wander away or something like that? I think there's something to that thought. On top of that, we get the story that actually, I believe, came from the family about Madeleine asking them where they were the night before, that she had woken up and that they weren't there. Does that mean that potentially her mother might have tried to dose her harder on that following night, and then maybe they came back and found out that they had dosed her too hard and that she had passed away? I think that there is, of all the theories that I've heard, I believe that there is a lot of possibility and potential in that theory, particularly because you have the parents that are kind of wishy-washy on, did they give their kids these over-the-counter drugs that are used for essentially helping your kids sleep. them saying they didn't, and then, as Richard pointed out, them showing the drugs that were actually taken by the family on vacation, and it did include some of that stuff. So I don't know. I think that's a very strong possibility, but I'm still caught between, there's a ton of compelling information about the family being related to this. There's still potential that it was someone else. And is there a conspiracy? I don't even think that that's really as important of a question. I don't buy into, I know I've said it enough, but the weight of that is all too heavy, and I think distracts from the actual truth of what this case is about. Boil it back to the details, boil it back to the testimony that was made, which included part of their friends that they were hanging out at the bar with. One of their friends supposedly came to look in on Maddie while she was sleeping in the room. Is he now discounting that information? Because he's saying that she was dead several days before this. Or is he saying that there was a dead body that was in that bed? Or maybe they had put a pillow and stuffed a pillow under the sheets or something like that. I don't know. But that's where I see this with cases all the time, particularly cases that go on this long. People start being kind of selective about what testimony they will accept because it works against their theory. It's really tough because once you get this far out, you're talking about 10 years later, what else are you going to rely on except the actual words that were said by the people that were there at the time? And yes, you might be critical of some people versus others, but you really have to take all of that into account. Just starting to slice people's opinions out, I don't know if that's really fair. And I think a lot of you out there do want me to say, no, the parents totally did this. It's totally obvious. There's a ton of information to support that. I get it. But there is also still doubt. There is doubt because there is other information that says someone else could have done this also. And until we know where that little girl is, until she is found in one way or another, it's going to be very hard for us to determine which group of information is actually correct in all this. And that's where I leave it. I don't want to put myself into a position of saying, see, I told you guys, I thought it was this the whole time. That's just not what I do. That's not what I'm about. If there isn't enough information for it to go to a conviction, if I don't have enough information that I feel like I need to contact some authority somewhere and say, hey, here's the puzzle pieces, you guys just need to put them together like this and you can see it, I'm not going to make any firm conclusion, and I certainly wouldn't start one of my videos with a bias already in place. Despite all that, like I said in the review, I really like this guy. I really like his work, and because he was so clear about that bias right from the start, I was able to be aware of it as I watched this, which is still a much stronger position to review information like this in than anything I'm seeing in terms of major mass media coverage on this case. So that's where I'm at with it. Where are you guys at with it? Please use the comments box below to discuss this more. I'm sure you will. I didn't expect you guys to kick up as many comments as you did on the first video this week that I put out on this. But obviously it's a case that touches a lot of us and that we want to see a conclusion to. And I'm still holding out. I'm holding out some kind of hope, guys. I want some answers to this. And I just want people to help each other work towards the truth and try to clear up some of this nonsense that's going on around this case. And I appreciate the heck out of Richard Hall for definitely dedicating a huge chunk of time and research and effort into doing that. So take care, everyone. Have a great day. I'll see you right back here on the Lord Marks channel.